Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our MTSS Gathering Pro Collaborative. This says session 2, but this is actually session 3. This is our vocabulary across the content areas, and we're glad that you were able to join us today. Just a quick reminder that you will be gaining renewal credits for attending these 2-hour sessions each month. And we will be giving these credits out at the end of the entire series, which will be in the spring, but we are keeping up with who is participating. So in order to get your credit, please make sure you add your first and last name to the chat and also complete the survey at the end of the session today. I wanted to point out to you that the recordings for the last 2 sessions are linked here, and I will send these back out in email. They came out in the email for this session, but I'll send these back out along with our recording for today. And we have several sessions coming up, so just to look in and make sure you have these dates on your calendar. And today we're going to start with our guest speaker for our gathering. And after we have Dr. Pam Kastner speak with us about vocabulary across content areas, then we will have a short time of Q&A with her. So if you have some questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to pull those up at the end and make sure we get those answered if we can, and if not, we'll get back with you. And then after she speaks, we'll have our growing session where we go into breakout rooms, and we will meet together there to discuss the readings and the session from today. And then we'll have a school spotlight from Newberry Elementary, and then we'll close up with some quick announcements. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speaker today, Dr. Pam Kastner. She's an educational consultant and former state lead for literacy in Pennsylvania at Patton, which was the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. And currently, she serves many roles. She's a faculty member at Mount St. Joseph University in the Reading Science program, and there she teaches graduate and doctoral program. And she was the contributing faculty member of the year in 2023. She's also presented all across the U.S. and internationally, and she partners with many state departments of ed and school districts to help with technical assistance, consultation, and coaching. And she also serves on the Pennsylvania Literacy Coalition, and she is the president of the Reading League of Pennsylvania. And if you don't follow her on Facebook, I recommend it. She has a lot of great resources that she shares there as well. The Reading League Journal Practitioner Editorial Board, she's on that as well, and a member of the Science of Reading and Defining Movement Coalition. So I'm going to stop sharing, Dr. Kastner, so you can share your screen. And I want to thank you for being with us today. Oops.
Be with all of you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, I think it went a little further ahead though than I wanted it to. And now it's not moving. Just when I said Zoom was going to be my friend, right?
No, it's all right. Yeah, I was going to say stop and start over. It's all.
Yes.
That's the best way.
There we go. From the beginning. There we go. All right. Well, it's such an honor to be with you here today. I hope it's warmer in South Carolina than it is in cold Pennsylvania right now. So today we had the honor of talking about vocabulary across the content areas. Such an important literacy topic to discuss. So happy to be here with you to do so. All right. So here's what we're going to learn. And again, because we have such a short amount of time, it's going to be a brief overview. Certainly we could spend a whole semester or a year talking about vocabulary. But we're going to be thinking about the what and why. Again, pretty brief just to frame ourselves in what it is and why it's important. And I'm going to be embedding this instruction with you within the language systems. We need to really integrate, don't isolate. That's something I've been saying a lot as I work in schools across the country and present, that when we isolate language skills, we make it very difficult for kids to make the connections within language and integrate those in a way when they're reading. So we'll spend some time talking about that briefly. Then, of course, the best way to teach a novice, and many of our students, of course, are novices with these words. That's why we're teaching them, is through explicit instruction. Again, a brief overview of that. We'll talk about vocabulary in the content areas, and I'm going to share 2 routines with you that you can hopefully take back to your schools and use right away. And then at the end, I'd like you to commit to at least one thing or one person you'll talk to about this work. So that's the big overview. So here's how we're going to learn. If you were with me in person, for sure we would be saying this out loud. Everyone does everything. So there will be times when I will ask you to say the words on the PowerPoint to engage you. And I would encourage you, wherever you are in schools, that you also adopt this motto from Kevin Feldman, that we move this practice of raising hands. I think there was about 100 of you when I looked earlier. If I were to individually call on one of you here, my evidence base on which I'd make my next instructional move is 1%. And that's not a very solid evidence base. So another thing I'd like you to take back with you, if you can, is to think about the policy of no hands raised unless to ask a question, that all students are thinking, writing, saying, and doing. So I'm going to do that as much as I can virtually. Whenever you see a text on a slide where you see it's bolded and it has this yellow highlight on it, that is, wherever you are, I'd like you to be speaking those words. So that's a choral reading. And then we're just going to have one waterfall response, and that's coming up pretty quick. All right. So we're going to start out by framing what is vocabulary and why does it matter? And what I'd like you to do is just briefly in the chat, I'm going to give you like maybe 15 seconds to think. And then I'm going to ask, you could be thinking now, what is vocabulary? When you think about vocabulary, how do you define it? So I'm going to put you on the clock, and then I'll ask everyone to respond at once. All right. So I'll just say 1, 2, 3, waterfall. So you're on the clock. And then maybe Charlene or any of your support friends could help in just sharing a few of them. All right, I gave you a little bit more time. How about waterfall? Put your thoughts in the chat about what is vocabulary.
Are you ready for me to read some?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, they're
Okay.
fast.
Yes, we've got language of communication, words that accurately specify communication, an everyday way of responding using familiar words, the meaning of words, words needed to be known in order to understand, an understanding of the deep meaning of words, words you need to learn to know content, the language of communication.
Very good answers. Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you for thinking about that before we even start. Well, I was really impressed with your vocabulary support document. So what I did is I chose to share with you the one that begins this great document. And it says that vocabulary refers, your turn, to knowing a word. Right. And so this can be both receptive and expressive. We typically have more words that we understand that we expressively speak and write, but it's both the breadth and the depth of the words that we know and the importance of them, in this case, to help understand the content area knowledge that the students are engaged in. So why does it matter? Well, vocabulary knowledge, what? Your turn? Strongly predicts comprehension and academic success. We need to know the words and the meanings of the words that we have decoded both accurately and automatically to gain meaning and comprehension. We're going to find out how much of the variance is included in that. We need vocabulary and knowledge too. And I'm sure you're saying grow together. And then early word gaps widen over time. We know that if we're not teaching vocabulary and language, if we're not embedding language every day, all day in classrooms, through our language as a teacher, through the language that we're expecting students to use in the classroom, for example, complete sentences using the content words in their mouth, we know that that gap will widen, and that because of the variation of words and knowledge that kids come into school, a school is the best place to do that. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Hart and Risley study as well. So students need to know the meaning of 90% of the words in fiction. That is a high lexical bar, right? So 90%, if you're sitting there with somebody close to you, turn to them and just say 90% in fiction. And if not, just say it out loud to yourself, just to make that solid in your mind that 90% of the words in fiction, and you won't be surprised to know that 95% of the words in nonfiction text must be known in order to gain meaning. All right. So again, a high bar for knowledge. And if we think about this kind of like in a pie chart, vocabulary accounts for 50 to 60%, 50 to 60% of the variance in comprehension. So pretty important. So when we think about words, we should be thinking about them in the simplest way in terms of how words are built. That's your turn to say. How they're built. And then, of course, how do we remember them? Right? So how words are built is around the structure of the English language. Our language is a deep orthography, a deep writing system, and it's morphophonemic. So wherever you are, please say that word, morphophonemic. It means we spell by both our words and understand our words by both morphemes and by the sounds of the phonemes. So the morphemes and the phonemes. So where you are, this is from the amazing Tiffany Hogan. It's not a relay race where word reading is handed off to language as a parallel structure. We need to be teaching both the word recognition skills and the language comprehension skills. We'll look at the reading rope here in a moment in tandem simultaneously, right? So this is the part that really focuses on that. So what do we need to be teaching if we're teaching in a way that's aligned with the evidence and structured literacy? We need to be teaching all of these language systems, and I want you to notice how those arrows are kind of recursive, that they're interdependent. So they're independent and interdependent. They each contribute to reading comprehension in their own way, and they are each essential, but they are not sufficient on their own. So let's just clarify what they are. First language system we'll talk about is phonology. Say that with me. Phonology, and then your turn. The study of how sounds function in language. Orthography, say orthography. And then orthography is the conventional spelling system of language. So ortho meaning straight or correct, and graph meaning letters. The correct way to write are graphemes. Anyone who's paid for an orthodontist understands about getting something straight, right? And then semantics is the study of meaning in language. Syntax is the rules governing sentence structure. Morphology is, I have to move my slide. Context, how context affects meaning in terms of, excuse me, the study of word formation and structure. Then pragmatics is the context of how it affects meaning. And then discourse, of course, is connected text beyond the sentence level. So all of these we'll be teaching when we teach vocabulary. Students have to have the words in their mouth. They have to see how it's spelled. They have to have a student-friendly definition. They need to know it's part of speech because many of our words are polysemous, poly meaning many, semous meaning meaning. They have multiple meanings and they can change their grammar structure based on how it's being used. They need to know its meaningful parts. We're trying to integrate, so we build neural pathways, many neural pathways for students to access, not only access words, but to own them. We're talking about the lexical quality hypothesis. I know it's early in the morning, but since we're talking about vocabulary, we're going to talk about some really robust academic language words, not only for students, but for us. So your turn. The lexical quality hypothesis proposes that word knowledge encompasses more than just knowing a word's definition. High quality lexical representations include, your turn, phonological, orthographic, grammatical, and semantic properties of a word, and its relation to the other words, right? So kind of like back to that circle where you were seeing all those language systems. The more ways we anchor a word in these language systems, the more accurate and automatic it will come to us when we both decode it and know its meaning. We want this to be accurate and automatic so the student can focus on gathering up the meaning and the gist through the sentences and paragraphs and text that they're reading. Anything that slows that down increases working memory and cognitive load. So we want to integrate, not isolate. Perfetti calls this the golden triangle. We love triangles in MTSS and in education. And this is just another triangle for us to think about. Sometimes it's actually even called, these three are called the Holy Trinity, in the sense that we need to bond three areas of language in order to know a word accurately and automatically with meaning. We need to know its pronunciation, the sounds, the phonemes within that word. We need to connect those sounds to the written form, the orthographic form. That's what we're doing when we're reading. We are looking at the letters in sequence, and then we are bringing pronunciation to that. If you were in a functional MRI, we would see Broca's area up here, kind of lighting up in the phonological area. And then, of course, we had to bond that to meaning. Right. And then specifically as to how it aligns to this particular sentence, because we know wage is one of those polysemous words that has multiple meanings. So if you were with me face to face, I'd have you be making this triangle that we need to bond phonology, orthography, and meaning. So where you are, just take out your finger and let's do it together. Ready? Phonology, orthography, and meaning. I oftentimes think about this too as a three-legged stool. And sometimes I even take one with me when I'm presenting. And one leg is phonology, one leg is orthography, and one leg is meaning. And if any one of those legs, if I took them out, what would happen? The stool would fall over. You would not have a high quality lexical representation of that word. So we must stop teaching in these silos, and we must be integrating language. Of course, Hollis Scarborough has made that very clear with her rope, her visual metaphor for skilled reading. You can see, of course, the word recognition skills at the bottom of the rope that are independently and interdependently supporting accurate and automatic word reading. And then at the top, we have these language systems that support, once we've decoded the word, that we know what it means. And you can see the components there. And then, of course, they're intertwined. If any single one of those strands is not strong or frayed in any way, there will be a deterioration or inability to comprehend what we are reading. So it is an independent and integrated system all at once. So back to those two basic questions. Basically, that was a quick overview of how words are built through language systems. And then, of course, how do we remember them? Right. So we need to not only know them, but we need to remember them, how to decode them, but also what they mean simultaneously so we can comprehend. So the best way to do that is explicit instruction. And sometimes, unfortunately, explicit instruction is considered drill and skill, but really, truly, it is drill and skill. Anything that you're good at that is a complex skill, someone taught you explicitly with lots of feedback and likely error correction, and gave you lots of practice in varied environments. I often equate this to when you learn to drive. This is also a very complex skill, but my father didn't say to me, Pam, you've been watching me drive for 16 years, now you can go and do it. He started with very clear, concise language. He started me from least complex to most complex, first in a parking lot, then on a country road, then on the highway. He explained the parts to me. He taught me in chunks, and he provided lots of practice and immediate error correction. Any skill that we're learning when we are a novice benefits from explicit instruction. Often said, benefits all, harms none. And that is correct. So how do we teach that? Right. So we had the outer layers of the language system. So that's the what we teach. And then this is the how we teach. So let's look at what that means. So explicit teaching is, everyone, clear and unambiguous. It's clear, concise language that's consistent across the tiers. We need to be using the same language in our instruction, what we call it. We need to have a common language in our instruction as teachers, but we also have to have common language that we're using across tiers to reduce the cognitive load and have very specific alignment. So clear and unambiguous. It needs to be systematic. It means instruction follows your turn, logical scope and sequence.
Skill development, moving from simple to complex.
Thank you. It's diagnostic. Teaching is informed by
Ongoing assessment.
Thank you. And then it's cumulative, new learning.
Builds upon previously taught skills and concepts.
So what this means is when we introduce a word to students, it can't be a one and done. They have to be using this word over time, over context, in writing and in conversation and in different domains, especially when we start talking about tier 2 words. The reason we specifically teach tier 2 words is because they're often called brick and mortar words or suitcase words. They travel among content areas, right? So here you this is the graphic that the International Dyslexia Association used as a visual graphic for structural literacy. And they have newer ones, but I still like this one because it shows the language systems, all of them that we need to be teaching specifically, but I love how it overlaps. So it's showing us they're both independent contributors, but they're interdependent on one another. And then on the outside, it's how we're going to do it. So we really have a nice blending of what is taught or what should be taught, and then how it's taught. All right. So what about direct instruction for vocabulary? Does it have evidence to support it? It certainly does. Students increase their scores by as much as 30 percentile points after receiving, and you can do this with me, direct and meaningful vocabulary instruction. We know from John Hattie's work, he has this hinge point where he talks about a 0.40. When we engage in practices that are 0.40 or higher, those are effective practices. So please take a moment to look at those effect size of a direct instruction and specifically how it relates to vocabulary. So today our conversation is centering around vocabulary and knowledge in the content areas, right? So briefly, with Beck's work that is very, very well known in terms of teaching vocabulary, her book, Bringing Words to Life, is truly a seminal text. I'm actually teaching a doctoral course right now in vocabulary and saw that the book has been purchased 525,000 times. So it's a pretty good book. And so I highly recommend it if you don't have it already, but you likely do. So the way Beck and colleagues talk about teaching vocabulary is through these 3 tiers. So we're back to that triangle again that we love in education. So at the bottom of that triangle is our tier 1 words. These are the words that we truly hope our students come in knowing, those nouns, very common basic words. When we think about their language of origin, those are those Anglo-Saxon words, right? Those tier 2 words are the ones that we choose to teach directly and explicitly. There's a difference, as you know, between spoken language and written language. Even though everyone on this wonderful webinar has very good language, they have gone to graduate school and taken many courses, our oral language day to day doesn't reflect the academic language that we see in written language. And so there's this gap between there. And typically for many of these words are tier 2 words: synthesize, analyze, coincidence, and many other words. These words need to be taught directly and explicitly, but we have to be choosy because one of the things that's most important in our instruction is time. So it not only has to be efficient, but effective. And so there's an art and a science to this, right? You're looking for tier 2 words that will cross over into different domains. But of course, knowing what your students know already and also knowing your students will guide the selection. But, here are some examples of those where you can see these might be tier 2 words that you would choose to directly teach or fast map as you are reading aloud or providing that information to students. That means providing a quick synonym for it because they already have that word and they can anchor it. To learn something new, we have to attach it to something that is known. So think about it as Velcro. You're Velcroing on to what is known, the unknown, right? You're making that connection. They're brick and mortar words. They hold things together. And these are questions that can guide you as you select those tier 2 words. And of course, you'll get these this PowerPoint and the handouts afterwards. So ask you to take a look at those because we don't have a ton of time together today. Now, the thing is with content area, we oftentimes will also be teaching content words, right? Those domain specific words. So for example, in social studies, it might be democracy, constitution, right? Amendment. It could be photosynthesis and science or parallelogram in tier 3. It's very important that students understand both the tier 2 and the tier 3 words and that they're taught directly, explicitly, and systematically, especially these words in the upper grades that are multi-morphemic. They are a lot to put in the mouth. They are multisyllabic. And oftentimes these are the words that scare kids when they see them. They think they're so big, they don't know how to attack them. And I'll share a resource with you at the end for that part, but today we're focusing on vocabulary. But keep in mind, when you're in the content areas, it likely will not just be tier 2 words, but it will also be tier 3 words. And then, of course, you'll find this alignment in your vocabulary support document from the department. So the most effective way to teach vocabulary is to have a routine that is consistent. So I'm just going to go over 2 quick routines with you because I want to translate knowledge into practice. Knowledge is absolutely essential. I want you to think about it as you build a house. You build a strong foundation. That's what we're doing when we build knowledge about language and how to teach it. But knowledge in itself is not sufficient as well. It's interdependent with practice. My simple view of better outcomes for kids is knowledge, and it's simple, but knowledge times practice. We must have the knowledge so that we can be diagnostic and prescriptive in the moment, but we also need to know how to teach most effectively the concepts or skills that we're teaching to students, right? So we don't have a lot of time, so we have to be both efficient and effective. Most things we do with kids don't harm them. They're good for them, but we want to do what is best for them. Right? So we're just going to look at 2 routines to teach vocabulary. And so when you go home tonight, I want an earworm. You know how you get songs stuck in your head? 2 mantras I want stuck in your head is everyone does everything. No hands raised unless to ask a question. And integrate, don't isolate. We need to be integrating the language systems. All right. So one way to do that is through POSSUM. This acronym originated with the amazing researcher in dyslexia and the neuroscientist, Dr. Marion Wolf. And what you're going to notice is you're going to see the language systems, right? So that means when they come to a vocabulary word and you're teaching that they say, I can pronounce the word. Say that with me. I can
Pronounce.
Thank you. That's phonology. Orthography. I can
Read and spell.
the word. So I know what its written form looks like. I know how to replicate that in writing. Syntax, I can identify the words.
Part of speech.
Thank you. Sentence level instruction is vital here. Semantics, I can say what the word
Means
and apply the word.
in various contexts.
And morphology, I can find the,
Meaning parts.
you see kind of down the side, we have this kind of acronym of POSSUM, right? And what I've done with this POSSUM, and specifically for you, is I went to your vocabulary document and I embedded what you have in your document to support this alignment between I'm teaching you and what you see in that document. We need to be able to pronounce the word, read and spell the word, know it's part of speech within the context of what we're teaching, know what it means, use it in various contexts, and then understand its meaningful parts, because when we get to these content areas, very rarely do you have just a base word. You often have a base with an affix, prefix, and or suffix. So they need to know those meaningful parts because those meaningful parts also travel. Re means to do again. Once they learn that, of course, if they see any word that begins with re, they not only can decode it, we want them to be able to do that, of course, but then they can attach meaning to it. Right? So morphology is very important all the way through, should start in kindergarten and go all the way up. There should be a morphemic scope and sequence as well. All right. So we're going to start out with the word inaudible. So wherever you are, I say the word, you say the word. This is an I say, you say, I write, you write, right? It's very interactive. One of the other misunderstandings about explicit instruction is that it's boring. It is not. It is very, very active. Students should be having, when they're in a novice area, responses 3 to 5 per minute. And not only does that increase learning, it decreases behaviors, thinking about that MTSS. So I say inaudible, you say inaudible. Ready? The word is inaudible. What word?
Inaudible.
Good job. Thank you. All right. We spell inaudible. Watch me, and you'll say the letters as I also write them. Ready? I, N, A, U, D, I, B, L, E. This is how we spell inaudible. I'm going to now do it in parts. Watch me, then your turn. Inaudible. What word, everyone? Inaudible.
Inaudible.
so we have the letters, of course, that spell inaudible, but we also want to be thinking about its meaningful parts as we move into morphology in just a bit here. And here we have it in the parts for its morphemes. Ready? Watch me, my turn. Inaudible. Inaudible. Your turn. Ready? Inaudible. Word. Inaudible. Students, if they are going to orthographically map a word, they must say the word and see the word. The students need to say it, not just the teacher, and the students need to see how it's spelled to anchor it in long-term memory, which is where we want it. All right, so there we could spell it, we're spelling it by letters, but we're also spelling it by parts to kind of prime them for the morphology that's coming up. Inaudible is an adjective. What is inaudible, everybody? It's an adjective. That's its part of speech. It means it describes. Here is a sentence with the word inaudible in it. Read it with me. Her words were inaudible through the glass. Inaudible means unable to be heard. What does it mean, everyone? Unable to be heard. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you do that. Go ahead. I really appreciate you doing that. Go ahead. What does it mean?
Unable to be heard.
You were a blessing. Thank you. All right. So when we think about the word inaudible, I want you to think about, because I want you to attach it to something that you already may know. Have you seen or heard this word anywhere before, or any of the word parts? Maybe you've heard a word that begins with in. It's a prefix. It means toward or not. Or maybe even audio, which means like audience or auditorium, right? Where we go to hear things. And then able, of course, means capable of, or to be capable. So when we think about its morphological parts, its meaningful parts, prefix in means everyone.
Not.
The root word audi means.
To hear.
And then the suffix able means what?
To be capable of.
So what does our word inaudible mean, everyone? To not be capable of hearing.
Yes.
Right? So we're unlocking the meaning through all these layers of language. Now, I did a little bit slower with you because it's, I'm just providing a model, but I want you to think about how much time that took. Not very much. It's a very efficient way to begin a vocabulary lesson. I work in schools all across the country, and what I love about this particular routine is I use it, and I taught kindergarten for many years and college at the same time. I use this routine in kindergarten in the morning and college at night. Did the words change significantly? Yes, they did. However, I am teaching in a way that ensures that students are mapping this word so they have a high quality lexical representation. I don't want them to just have access to words. I want them to own them, to use them and understand them and write with them and speak with them. Right. So this routine, I have a high school teacher in Alaska that I work with. And right when you walk in his room, you see POSSUM and then boom, he just goes into vocabulary. And the kids, it's a very quick process, right? So this may seem a little kindergarten-ish or elementary, but truly it's not. There is a resource that I put on the Padlet that has a graphic organizer for the Iowa Reading Research Center for Possum. It's very elementary. For those folks who are elementary, I suggest you look at it, but certainly just like my high school friend in Alaska, he puts POSSUM. So it's very powerful and important to be in his classroom to learn vocabulary. However, I do not want students in that school to just learn vocabulary in Guy's classroom. If you want to amplify knowledge and vocabulary in your school, you will ensure that every teacher teaches vocabulary the same way, using the same language, using the same pedagogy, right? You're reducing the cognitive load. Our kids who had the most or the least sameness are our kids who are at risk. Vocabulary is taught one way in tier 1 and is taught a different way in tier 2 and is taught a different way in tier 3, or this is the way the ELA teaches but the science teacher teaches it this way, or the math teacher teaches it, or they don't teach it at all. We are all teachers of language. It must be a shared commitment and responsibility if you truly want to improve students' vocabulary, their knowledge, and their comprehension. These routines must be consistent all the way through. All right. So that's the other thing. All right. So the next one I'm going to share with you is integrated maps. These come from great middle schools. It's a wonderful site, and it's associated with the Meadow Center and Dr. Sharon Vaughn, who's a very prolific and respected researcher. But here's what I want you to notice. I've been kind of harping a bit on all the language systems. One important thing to do as an informed educator is to look at your instruction materials with an eye for alignment to the evidence. We must have fidelity to evidence. So if something's missing from a high quality instruction material, and this comes from a very reliable source, you would get together with your administrator, your coaches, your grade level team and say, wow, this is a really good routine, but, and then also we know at times things are stuffed and they're overstuffed. And to refer to my friend Anita Archer, we need to teach the stuff and cut the fluff, but not in isolation, always together, so that we have this consistency across classrooms, across grade levels, across the school. All right, so here's a vocabulary map. Similar to in your vocabulary document, support document, it's similar to a Freyer model. But I'm going to kind of go through the parts again quickly because we don't have a lot of time together. But you'll see in the top part here, we have the definition. Again, it's a student-friendly definition because students have to map to known to unknown. Then synonyms, again, to anchor them in known to unknown. And then at the top, you will see like the word would be here. And then if there's a cognate in a language of a students in your classroom, you would include it there. All right. Here you have a visual representation of that word. And over here you have an example sentence. So you have an example that's inside the text and outside the text. Do that with me. Inside the text and outside the text, because we want them to have a broad understanding of these words. So the first sentence comes from outside of the text. And then this sentence as an example comes directly from the passage that they will be reading. Teachers create these maps. Students do not. And then you have a turn and talk. Again, one outside and one inside. So in this map, we see phonology. I say the word, you say the word. We see syntax at the top. We see semantics in terms of the student-friendly definition, but we're missing a language system here. So what's missing here? Quickly, we're going to put it into the chat quickly because we're running out of time. What language system is missing? And then Charlene, you could tell me, or one of your colleagues.
I see orthographically mapping listed in the chat. Morpheme, ortho.
Yes, we're specifically missing morphemes.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is this is a good routine, but it isn't explicit in the sense that it says, I say the word, you say the word. I spell the word, you spell the word. I tell its meaning, you tell it back to me. I anchor it into the text, right? So again, we would want to embed explicitness, but also look at this with a critical eye to see about the language systems. Again, it's good, but can it be better? Yes, it can. And that is the art of teaching, to have this knowledge, to know at what we're looking at needs either improvement or it needs implementation added or it needs de-implementation, right? So of course you're going to read the passage first. These are the steps. You're going to be thinking about the words you're going to choose, right? These are the steps at 2 or 3. We can't teach them all. And then you're going to create a map for each of them. The student-friendly definition, the word, the cognate, a visual representation, a synonym or synonyms, an example sentence, and then a turn and talk. All right. So this is just an example of a passage with about Gandhi. And in this passage, the teacher, when she read it or he read this passage, they chose to teach the word compassion. So you can see kind of here a fulfilled graphic organizer for this vocabulary map. All right, so you see the word at the top. I say the word, you say the word, I say the cognate, you say the cognate. We talk about its student-friendly definition of showing great care, concern. We talk about its synonyms. We have a visual representation here. Of course, I'm going to be adding, right? I'm going to be adding morphology to this. And you can see in the first example sentence, it aligns with the visual, but it's outside the text. And the next example is inside the text. And then, of course, we want kids having these words in their mouth and rehearsing them with complete sentences. The other thing I would add to this sentence is this graphic is language stems. Tell your partner about a time you showed compassion towards others. Partner 1, turn to partner 2. Begin this way. A time I showed compassion was. and then it will be partner two's turn. I want to hold kids accountable for both speaking and listening when partner talks. So I always, when I ask to share out, I'll say, and I'll ask you to share out what your brilliant partner said. And you will say, my brilliant partner said, a time I showed compassion was. Because then I'm holding them accountable for using the word in their mouth, for actually speaking about that with their partner, right? So it's this, what I call warm demanding, that we must have high expectations of our kids in a very warm, trusting environment, but we also have to provide scaffolds for them. So in addition to the morphology, I would specifically script out for me in advance the language stems that students would be using and how I would ask them to share out. We have to make our turn and talks more powerful and impactful. All right, so we're going to do one together. Again, these are the steps around that. And here's how we're going to do it. I chose the word bravado out of here. And this is a passage about the end of Prohibition. So here is, again, the graphic organizer. So wherever you are, when you think about the word bravado, just in your head, choose two or one. It's okay. One or two, or create your own when you think of bravado. Would you choose A, B, C, D, or E? I'm just giving you examples of what you could have written or chosen as a student-friendly definition, right? And then if anyone can turn their camera off and just give me a thumbs up, I'll know when to turn to the next slide. It'll tell me that you've got something in your head, and likely everyone else does too, when you've chosen. I guess you probably have, so I've seen nodding. Okay, so when you think about synonyms for bravado, which ones might you choose to anchor kids in this Velcro from the known to the unknown? Again, this is both art and science. Of course, you need to use the science to choose the words as synonyms, but it's an art because you know your kids best, yes? And so which two would you choose? I know which one I like best, but I'll tell you later, all right? All right, so Charlene, you think we're good to go? Yeah, okay. And then here are sentences, example sentences. Again, you would choose one. Remember, outside the text and inside the text. All right. Have one in your head. Okay. And then turn and talk prompts. Which would you use? Right. And then which image would you choose? And these are just three possibilities. I had to say, in terms of synonyms, I'm really love chest thumping because it's visual, kinesthetic. And I have to say, I love that cowardly lion. So there you go. But you choose what you want. So no matter what you chose, this is what a potential map could look like for that word. So I just kind of like wanted to walk you through it a little bit like in a we do kind of way to give you some options. So again, this is a great resource. It's very similar to your Frayer model. It aligns with your vocabulary document very closely, but just a little bit different. The most important thing is, in my opinion, is that you choose the organizers that you're going to use based, of course, usually on the text structure, but also that everyone uses the same one, so it's consistent. We shouldn't be having all these different graphic organizers for different text structures or different ways. It just adds to the cognitive load that kids are experiencing. They cannot focus on the learning or the content when they're trying to figure out what is this graphic organizer? And my teacher in ELA uses this one, and my teacher in science uses this one. Again, consistency is so important, both in the instructional routines you choose, the language you use, and everyone does it the same way. You'll know you're doing it well and accurately that when you miss a skip, your kids will say, you miss a step, the kids will say, wait, you forgot to have us say the word. Or you forgot to spell the word. That is a good sign. They are internalizing structure. Structure frees us to focus on learning. Okay? So what do these routines look like in science? So here's an example of this graphic organizer in science. All right, and then the one we looked at really was focusing on social studies, but you can see now it has the annotation around it. All right. So two routines to consider using if you're not already. The possum, which is a quick, but it anchors teachers in remembering to teach all the language systems. These words, these academic words, these tier 2 words must be in students' lexicon. Our teachers know them. Our students need to know them. They need to know how to speak them, write them, spell them, read them, know their meaningful parts, know their part of speech. If we want strong lexical representations, we don't want those fuzzy representations. So I actually made it. I can't believe it. This is a record for me because I could talk about this a long time. So I want you to reflect on what we learned in this short amount of time together. We began by framing this time together by thinking, what is defining vocabulary and why it's important? What is the evidence to support it? We talked about academic language and how it differs from spoken language and how both tier 2 words and tier 3 words must be taught explicitly. We can't teach all of them. We need to be efficient and explicit when we teach them and give them many opportunities to use the words so that they own them. They don't just have access to them. I shared 2 routines with you. Each routine should embed all the language systems. Possum does. It's a quick one, but it's a very effective one. If we say a word the wrong way and store it the wrong way, it makes it very difficult to retrieve it. If you've ever listened to a song and you've kind of mushed together those words, and then someone next to you says, "That doesn't say that," you know what I mean. How hard is it to get it out? We want errorless learning. We want to teach it right the first way, so that's anchored in memory that way. Right. And then I'd shared the vocabulary maps with you from great middle schools. Right. So I want you to think of one thing that you will tell someone or one thing you'll think about taking back and put it in the chat. And then I'll show you some things that are on the Padlet. So I don't know if they'll put it in the chat, but I'm
I'm
hoping.
launching vocabulary map,
Yay.
task
Thank you.
mapping, sharing vocabulary map with middle school, the
Yay. Thank you. Thank
importance
you.
of direct vocabulary instruction, possum, having the possum integrated across the building. It says possum was an eye opener. The
Oh,
vocabulary
good. All right,
map
I'll stop
guided
you there
through
because
the
I know I
social
don't want to cut into
skills.
your breakout time, but thank you. It just does my
Okay.
heart so good. Just like you, every morning I get up and I hope to make a difference in the lives of educators and children, and you just made me feel like I did. So thank you for that. All right. So I always create a Padlet of resources when I do a presentation because no matter how much time I have with you, it's never enough. And certainly 40 minutes is a really brief time. So on the Padlet, you'll see lots of resources. And here are just some of them. I've even added to it this morning. But you'll see the presentation handout. I put it there this morning. You'll see the graphic organizer that the IDA uses now for structured literacy, but lots of resources. And how I group them was you'll see when you go to the Padlet resources that we focused on in this presentation, but then you'll see many, many resources after that. And specifically, since we had very little time to talk about morphology, you'll see a wonderful resource from a friend, Dr. Kelly Grillo, that has all these amazing resources for morphology. This wonderful intensive intervention practice guide from the National Center for Leadership in Intensive Intervention on Morphology. And then in Australia, they have created the Syntax Project and the Morphology Project. And they have taken, you'll see this scope and sequence here, and all the work is done, PowerPoints, everything. It is an incredible resource to check out. All right. So in addition, I have lots of videos of Dr. Anita Archer explicitly teaching vocabulary. She is the master teacher of the world. If you want to see how to teach a vocabulary lesson with efficiency and effectiveness, I have put one on there for 2nd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, and specifically, I put one on there for 8th grade where she is reviewing geometry vocabulary words. It is a masterpiece because we cannot just explicitly teach words. We must circle back to them to ensure that kids don't only have access to these words, but that they own them. So that's the Padlet. It was created just for you. And so that's the QR code. Charlene has a direct web link if you need that. And it has a very tricky password because this Padlet is just for you. And it's called Words, WORDS with a capital W. And that is $9.50. And I did it, Charlene. You have witnessed
Yes.
a miracle.
I am very, very appreciative. I'm going to give people just a second, and then I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And Wendy, can you drop the link in? Can you access it, or Abeline? It's in the, well, actually, I think when I share my screen, it's gonna,
Want me to stop sharing?
yes, please.
Okay. Yep. All right. There you go.
All right. It is, Wendy and Abeline, it is in the notes section on this slide. I'm pretty sure I have the link, if you could pull that up. If any, and if you can't, let me know and I'll stop and come out of the presentation mode and share it. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Kastner, if you dropped it in the chat throughout, we may or may not have caught it because we had a lot of things in chat. So if you would either drop it back in the chat or unmute and ask, we're just going to go until we've got 8 minutes. We'll go until 10 o'clock with some questions, and then we're going to stop and move on to the next part. So are there any specific questions for Dr. Kastner while we have her on the line? It was a very great presentation. It's very thorough.
Oh, thank you.
It was a great presentation. I appreciate that you made sure that those of us who are high school had some entry points because vocabulary is part of our 90-day plan currently. And
wonderful.
yep. And so we have a very high ML population. So the cognates is very helpful as well. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And yes, I have been doing tremendous amount of work in secondary literacy. As you know, for a large part of my career, I taught kindergarten, so I'm really invested in building that strong foundation. But we know our upper elementary, middle school, and high school students have been impacted by COVID in a meaningful way, and it's really showing up. Middle school teachers, boy, they have a heavy load right now. So thank you. I hope it helps.
Absolutely. We definitely are finding that reading is our biggest stumbling block, and that's across all contents. So
I would agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get lost even in the sentences. So we, really need to be teaching at the sentence level and then building that up. So that's a whole nother training, but I agree with you. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Anyone else that can help in any way?
I think Mandy has a question.
Okay.
How much time?
What's that?
Mandy has a question
Okay.
regarding how much time do you recommend spending on vocabulary instruction?
Well, I think that can vary, of course, because it depends on the text that you're teaching. And it also depends on how many words you're going to teach. But we typically can't teach more than 3 or so at one time. So it really doesn't take that much time, but you could build on that. One thing you'll see too on the Padlet is I have a morphology wall example. So if you're teaching morphology too, it's like you can go in there too and start building words and doing review. So of course you have to teach it, but you do have to build in time to review it, or the kids will lose it. I mean, it's like anything else. If you don't use it, you lose it. And especially those critical words that are tier 2 words that you want your kids to truly know, and those tier 3 words in your content, they have to be revisited. We can't just teach it and forget it. And that we all know that. There's a great deal of research, around the instructional hierarchy right now. Paul Kirshner's work, Carl Hendrick's work, John Shallow's work, and then the types of practice that are necessary depending on where a student is in the learning instructional hierarchy, whether it's acquisition, application, fluency, generalization, or adaptation.
Any
Perfect.
other
Thank you so
questions?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the question, Mandy. Thank you for reading it out for us, Abeline. Any other questions? Dr. Kastner, I want to thank you so much for giving your time this morning.
I'm happy to.
We truly, truly appreciate your expertise in this vocabulary is so critical to comprehension, and there's a lot more to it than knowing the definition. And we want to thank you for going so deep with us today. And also for emphasizing how important it is to have that school-wide routine in place. I think that's something that we all should go back and look at and make sure we have that to make things more effective for our students. So,
Actually, it's better for teachers too.
true, very
It
true,
really
very
is.
true.
That's the great thing about instructional routines. Not only does it decrease the cognitive load for students, it also decreases the cognitive load for teachers. It's a win-win.
Perfect. Great point.
Okay.
So we're going
All
to
right.
move
Well,
into
thank
our
you.
growing section, and Dr. Kastner, you're welcome to stay, but you do not have to. A lot of times our presenters do drop off, but you're welcome to stay in for our growing. But
You let me know what would be best, and I will do whatever is best.
okay. Well, you're welcome to stay for just a moment and kind of see
Okay.
how it goes. And then,
Yeah.
I mean, if you need to fall out, that's fine.
Okay.
We have the resources that were sent out through email. It was our vocabulary document, and then one other. And so they're shared here. And Wendy and Aileen, if you don't mind, they are also, the links are also in the notes section of this slide. If you could drop those into the chat. Just for those who may not have their email handy. But we have a blog from the 95% group, and we also have the SCDE's vocabulary support document. So if you didn't have a chance to read those in advance, those were the pre-readings that were sent out in email. And if you will go into a breakout room of your choice in just a moment, I'd like for you to discuss some thoughts, questions, and epiphanies about the readings as well as our presentation this morning with Dr. Kastner. So this is a chance for you to, if you would, take a screenshot of this slide if you don't have it, just so you'll remember when you go into the room, some of your questions and some of your prompts. You don't have to go through these one by one, but we do want the conversation to stay focused, and we want the conversation to give everyone in the room who would like to speak a chance to speak. So we have, again, rooms broken by lower and upper elementary, middle, high, and district and school leadership. So you can choose a room of your choice. If you go into the bar that has your audio and video and all of that and the chat, there are three dots on the right side that say more, and you can click on breakout rooms there, and they will all appear, and you can select a breakout room of your choice. If you have trouble finding a breakout room, just stay right here in the main room and we'll help you get to a room that you'd like to go to. So you may go ahead and head to your rooms.
Charlene, how many minutes was that?
I'm gonna skip back. I think it's 25, but let me go back really quickly. 25 minutes for breakout rooms. Thank you, Wendy.
So I just hop around a little bit? Is that what?
You are, yes, because you're a co-presenter, so you're welcome to do that. You can hop in and out of rooms.
So 1 to 3 is lower elementary, 4 to 6 is upper. So I came across now.
And when you go to breakout rooms, they should be labeled.
My more button doesn't show breakout rooms.
And how do I get into the breakout
I was
room?
just going to say that mine's not showing a breakout room
not
either.
showing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not showing breakout rooms either. Me either.
All right.
See it on you're on the screen, but I don't see any place to click.
Options.
Mine is saying it's open, but I'm going to close them all, Charlene, and then try to reopen.
I'm clicking allow participants. Maybe that was.
Oh, okay.
Worked.
You got it now?
There it is. Yep. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Thank y'all for telling me. And I am going to pause the recording until breakout rooms end. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Does it look like most people? Oh, I see. They're still coming back. I'll wait just a moment. While we're waiting, is there anything from the breakout room that anyone wants to share for the good of the whole group? I know you just had a chance to talk with your colleagues, but if there was one particular thing that really stood out that you want to share with everyone, please feel free to unmute and briefly do that. We want to stay on schedule, but we do have just a moment.
Right, I'm going to pop off, but I just want to say thank you to everybody. I popped into a bunch of the breakout rooms and have great conversations. And thanks for the honor of joining you today. And
Thank you, Dr.
have a good
Castor.
one.
You too. We
All right, take
appreciate you
care.
being here. Bye-bye.
My honor. Bye-bye.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our new feature this year, our School Spotlight. And today we're very excited to introduce you to Newberry Elementary School. And we're going to try to keep our school spotlights focused on our topic for the month. So we're going to be focusing on vocabulary today. We have Nikita Dean. Miss Dean, I have seen her in action. She's an outstanding teacher, and she is a dedicated second grade teacher with 15 years of classroom experience. She's a proud graduate of Morris College. She creates engaging, supportive learning environments where every child can thrive. We used to kind of want to just go sit in Miss Dean's room because it smelled so good. It had just the right lighting. It was such a beautiful place to be. And she's an outstanding teacher. As I said, she was honored as Newberry Elementary's Teacher of the Year and as Newberry County District School Teacher of the Year runner-up. She holds her GT certification and is committed to inspiring curiosity, confidence, and a lifelong love of learning. So I am going to stop sharing my screen so Miss Dean can share her screen. And I will let y'all take it away. And it's 10 minutes for the share. We're not watching to the second, but about 10 minutes for that. And then about 10 minutes if people have some questions for you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for having me. I want to take this opportunity to share a little bit about the vocabulary instruction in my second grade classroom. And I'm going to start by defining what explicit vocabulary instruction is.
Hold on, technical difficulties.
Here we are. Explicit vocabulary instruction is a direct, planned teaching method where educators explicitly define and explain new words to students. Explicit vocabulary instruction involves selecting tier 2 keywords, that's high frequency words that appear across many texts and are often abstract and have multiple meanings. Explicit vocabulary instruction also involves providing clear, kid-friendly definitions and giving students the opportunity to practice using those words in various contexts to build a deeper understanding and improve reading comprehension. We want to make sure that students are understanding words thoroughly rather than just memorizing them. Here you see Scarborough's reading rope. It shows reading as two main bundles of strands, one for word recognition, and that one includes phonemic awareness, decoding, and sight word recognition. And the other one is for language comprehension, and that one includes the vocabulary, which we're focusing on today, background knowledge, and literacy knowledge. Based on scientific research, this model emphasizes that both areas must be strong for proficient reading to occur. As you all know, some of our students come to us already suffering from word poverty. Children in low-income homes are exposed to significantly lower or fewer words in early years, and this creates a gap that begins in infancy and can impact future language and academic development. So the question is, how do we fill that gap? 1, with early intervention. 2, quantity and quality, increasing the reading volume through independent reading, through read alouds, providing high quality classroom language instruction, direct explicit vocabulary instruction, which is what I'm focusing on today, and then structure analysis, looking at roots, prefixes, and suffixes, and so forth. The best way to teach vocabulary is to 1, pronounce the word, read the word, write the word, tell students the meaning of the word, say more, give multiple examples, synonyms, ask questions about the word's meaning, and elicit word use by the students. Encourage them to talk about the word and use the word in context. So what does the instruction look like? So I pulled one of the words from a story I did last week on all about earthquakes. It was a nonfiction text, and one of the words was collide. So here you'll see the word collide, and then you'll see underneath it where it's broken apart into the syllables, the first syllable versus the second syllable, and we usually color code just to break the syllables apart. Here you see the definition of the word collide, meaning to crash into each other. We have the synonym, which is crash. We tell the part of speech, and we do serve a high ML population, so we do include the cognate for the Spanish word as well. We have a sentence, the word being used in context, the water and rock collide in the ocean, and providing them with a visual as well. Here's another use of the word collide. My classmate and I collide because we weren't watching where we were going. Here is a snippet from the actual text that the students will read so they can see the word highlighted in the text. It also shows visuals, as you can see, with the 3 plate movements. And I would ask the class to show which direction the plates are colliding into each other and what words in the text help them to figure out what collide meant. Here, we have 3 pictures provided, and we're asking students to find the non-example, asking yes or no questions. Is lying on the couch colliding? Is crashing into the pole colliding? Bugs on a windshield colliding? Here, in vocabulary instruction, we focus on word relatives a lot, and that refers to a strategy that teaches students how words are connected through a shared base word, root, or meaning, expanding their vocabulary beyond just an isolated word. This is done by grouping words into families, such as teaching students the base word collide along with its relatives. The 2 cars collided when the red car wasn't looking. Colliding with a car is very dangerous. Sometimes collisions make people go to the hospital if they are very serious. So we're focusing on the word collide, but also looking at different uses of that word. Here is where we do the check for understanding. Students are given the opportunity to use the word in a sentence to show that they understand its context. I usually provide my 2nd grade students with a sentence frame just to get them started. Some of them kind of veer off on their own because they're a little bit more stronger as far as using words. But the sentence frame encourages them to use the word in context. So begin by saying, one time I collided with, and I give students an opportunity to share a time when they collided with something. And sometimes they'll try to leave the word off. I ran into or I crashed into someone. I'll go back and say, tell me the time when I collided. So I encourage them to use that word. Okay. Are there any questions?
I have one. How do you select which words you go through this process with?
So usually, Open Court is the reading program that we use. Open Court will give us the tier 2 words for that story. So I don't have to dig through the story. It provides it for us.
Okay, I love this. I will definitely share.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I want to point out that Ms. Dean was not able to watch Dr. Kastner's presentation this morning because she was teaching. So she just joined us for this. So it's amazing how much these 2 presentations align. And we're very happy to see that. But we also got some new ideas from what you shared as well. You shared some things that were not in her presentation. So thank you for that. Are there more questions for Ms. Dean? And we also have some other leadership from Newberry on the call today. We're happy to have y'all in the session. And so if there are questions for them as well, yes, I just pulled her literacy coach back into the frame. But if you have questions for them, one thing I will say that Dr. Kastner mentioned this morning that you were not able to hear, ladies, was that she highly recommends that the school have a consistent vocabulary routine to reduce the cognitive load for students across the school. So, is that something that you're already doing, or is that an area that you're considering?
Well, since we went through letters before we adopted our new curriculum, we kind of put these things into play in most grade levels. So most grade levels kind of follow this process when they're introducing new vocabulary. Sometimes it's not as many slides. We have another format where it might be all on one slide, but you have the same components. And we have noticed, great gains in that area because of that. and it's just making a difference because I think kids can connect and relate to the words a little bit more. And if they're able to use them, then we really have added those to their schema of things in their life.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions?
Okay. You want us to stop sharing?
Okay, and I love that you mentioned that you're using your HQIM to save time for your planning, that it already pulls those words for you. That's great as well. Someone says, are you able to share the Collide example slides? If y'all are able to send those slides to me, I will make sure to send that out in email if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. I mean, that's probably easier than dropping it into the chat.
Mhm.
We'll just
And,
send it out in email.
And sometimes I think as far as open court, they do give us probably more words than kids can sometimes handle. So we do sometimes look at those words and kind of pick and choose if we think they are more tier 2 or tier 3 at that point. So we don't go into detail with every word that open court suggests. We do kind of go through and look at those to make sure they are going to make the impact we need them to make.
And that question was asked this morning too. They asked, how many would you do or how much time would you spend on it? And Dr. Kastner said, probably about 3, not that there's a set number. She said it depends, but probably no more than like 3 in a day. But again, you've got to make that call. And some of the work Dr. Anita Archer has done also, one of her components is to choose that critical content and make sure you're teaching the one that you're going to get the most bang for your buck for with what you have there. So it's not that you're not teaching all of those words, but you're teaching certain words in depth.
Definitely.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. So with that being said, for the school,
Yes.
do you all as a team come together and choose which words you will teach across the grade level from the text, or is that like left up to individual teachers?
No. We do it together. So second grade, we plan together. We look at the text, we backwards plan, we go through the assessment, like what is that going to look like at the end and which words are going to give us the most bang for our buck. Not that we ignore the others. We may talk about it just a little or throw another example in there somewhere or give a non-example on a different day. But at the same time, because we read the story multiple times during the week, I might not address the same 3 that I introduced on Monday, but I will hit them all by the time I get to the end of the week. That makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? We still have time. If not, I want to thank you both for taking your time today to come on and to share what you're doing in your school. I know people really appreciate seeing what's happening right here in our state around and some examples. And so I appreciate that. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I think you might have to hit stop share.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. And so we have just a few announcements that we're going to make. We still have 3 sessions left. We don't have anything in December because December is a really busy month. But we will have Dr. Paul Riccomini with us in January, and he is going to be talking about the science of learning. He does have a math background, but this is not going to be specifically a math presentation. This is going to be the science of learning. Dr. Judy Elliott will be with us in February. She is going to be talking about database problem solving. And then in March, it is going to focus on behavior, but I've got to secure that speaker. But it's most likely going to be someone from BASC, from our Behavior Alliance of South Carolina, but I've got to get that confirmed. But either way, it will be a focus on our behavior component, which is wrapped tightly in everything with MTSS because we are looking at the entire student. We also have a few other free PD opportunities available. The Academic Alliance of South Carolina is hosting an MTSS Summit Series. They still have four 4 topics left. You'll see that some of these topics are broken into elementary and secondary. These are full day face-to-face free trainings. So if you scan that code over there on the side, that QR code, it will take you to their site, and I'm not sure, Wendy and Abeline, I'm not sure if I have that link on the bottom and the notes of this slide or not for Academic Alliance of South Carolina, but if there's any way you can do that, not the registration link, but just the QR code link, because some people have difficulty with the QR code. If it's possible to pop that in. If not, we'll make sure we put it in the email follow-up. But Dr. Judy Elliott will be there next week, and she is amazing. And so if you're able to go or send a representative, I would recommend that. And we are the team of 2 for MTSS at the State Department, and we thank you for all you do. We also have, this is a list of all of the people in our Office of Instructional Supports. If you have any questions or need help in any of these specific areas, if we can't help you, we can lead you to someone who can. And if you would take a moment to complete the survey, this will ensure that you get your credit, your renewal credit for the course. We're going to finish a little bit before 2 hours, but that's okay. We're going to get 2 hours of credit for today. So once you complete your survey, then that will be all for today. And if you could, Wendy and Abeline, if either of you are able to drop the survey link in the chat, that would be great. If not, I can.
It's there.
It's
Perfect.
there.
Thank you, ladies. They're on it. I can't see the chat, so I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
Wendy has already dropped it in there.
Thank you. So if you would just take a minute to complete that survey, and that will, again, someone asked early in the presentation, and it may have been answered, but I did see it, that they came in a little bit late and they didn't sign in, but there's the sign in is just to put your name in the chat. And then also complete this survey, and those 2 things are going to make sure you get your credit. So I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm going to stay on as long as needed. Thank y'all for being here with us again today.